Hey, everybody. So, for the last 19 years almost, I've been doing OffBeat on Fridays. And usually, OffBeat is movie reviews or book reviews or wine and beer reviews, restaurant reviews, that sort of thing. And just trying to do something a little bit different. Well, I want to change it up a little bit more. I mean, it's only been almost 19 years, right? So, I thought it might be fun from time to time to interview a creative type, a creative person, um, writers, people like that, who will give us some insight into their creative process. And because I think there's things we can learn from lots of different people in lots of different fields, not just from the business community. And so this week, to sort of launch this, to start this off, I'm doing a Zoom interview with Mike Lupica, who I had a chance to sit down with the other day. And via Zoom, Mike Lupica is one of the best known sports writers in America. For 40 years, he's been writing columns. He still appears once a week on Sundays in the New York Daily News in a column called Shooting from the Lip. He's written for Esquire. He's written for all sorts of magazines. He's done the Sports Reporters on ESPN and now as a podcast. He has his own podcast. He has done practically everything. And recently, he has picked up Robert B. Parker's mantle and is now writing the Sunny Randall series, and now, has just come out with his first contribution to the Jesse Stone series. It's called Fool's Paradise. It's his first Jesse Stone novel, and I was curious about what made him want to do it. I knew that he had known Robert B. Parker for a long time, so we caught up via Zoom, and I think you'll find this interesting. I think you'll find it illuminating, and there's nuggets in here that can be really helpful in terms of how you run a business. So enjoy. Well, Mike Lupica, welcome to Morning Newsbeat. I appreciate you doing this. As I mentioned to you before we even came on, I've actually had a chance to interview in the past Robert B. Parker. I've interviewed Ace Atkins, Reed Farrel Coleman, who just preceded you on the Jesse Stone novels. And I'm curious, you're actually the fourth author of the Jesse Stone books. Parker obviously set the template. Michael Brandman then followed up, and he sort of made them more like the movies. Reed Farrel Coleman, there was a lot of angst in his books because that's what he does. And that's not a criticism, but he's a wonderful writer. Yeah. And you seem to have brought them back to the original, sort of the original flavor that Parker sort of gave it. And I'm curious, are the Jesse Stone books different? Are they more of a blank slate that you can play with, unlike, say, the Sunny Randall books, which you're also writing, or even the Spencer novels, where those are first person, they're more specific? Jesse Stone gives you more room to play for different
Yeah.
things?
Yeah, I mean, I went back and, I've read and reread everything Bob ever did. I love the the fact that with Fool's Paradise, James Naughton is back doing the audiobooks, because I thought he did the best job with the audiobooks and he kind of just got the right attitude. Bob's books to me are not just about the dialogue, they're about the attitude. And I thought he was a great plotter, but with Sunny, with Jesse, I just felt like you had to want to go hang with them for 300 or so pages, that you were along for the ride and you were eavesdropping on some great conversations. But I went back and read Split Image, okay, which is, and you could see in Split Image that Bob was moving on from Sunny and Richie, and she loved the dynamic between Jesse Stone and Sunny. And it's not a big spoiler alert here because I put Jesse in the last Sunny, but Sunny's going to play an interesting part in Fool's Paradise, because I'm just now exploring that dynamic. But again, when I read Bob now and I go back and look at my first mysteries, you could see what an influence he had on me, just in terms of the sound and the attitude and the fun. I wanted to bring Jesse's sense of humor back, especially in his relationships with Sunny and Molly and Sue.
Is third, as a writer, is third person easier or harder to do than first person?
Well, after I stopped writing mysteries, I wrote some comic novels about sports, Bump and Run and Red Zone and you know, Wild Pitch and stuff like that. So I was always writing in the first person. First person is quite natural. But then all of my books for young readers, all of them have been written in the third person. So I had settled into a real tight third person narrative. And so it was fun to go back to that with Jesse. And for me, just for me as a writer, I felt like I was connecting with an old friend, because I love those books, because I did feel that they did have a different sound from the Spencer books and from the Sunny books. And, you know, once I got a chapter into it, it was just really, really fun being back in that world.
It's interesting you talk about sound. I was reading an old Esquire column that you did about Elmore Leonard.
Yeah.
And one of the it's such a great column, but one of the things that he talks about is the sound. And I can remember, when I interviewed Robert B. Parker, and he said this to me, but I think he probably said it to anybody who asked the question, because he knew what his answers were. Was that when you say, why do you think people like the books? And I can remember him saying, I think they like the way it sounds. They like the way it sounds to them, even though they're reading it, because there's a rhythm, there's a beat, and it's pleasing in that way. And that's something I think Elmore Leonard, they're very different. And even if you throw in then Raymond Chandler and all those sites, there is a sense of that.
Yeah, there's sound. And he had his own sound, and Dutch had his own sound. And, you know, that piece about Elmore Leonard began me writing the Sporting Life column for Esquire for about 10 years. And it also began a friendship that lasted from the time I flew out to see him until the day he died. We were really close. I used to talk to him 3 and 4 times a week, and his sound was good. You know, a friend of mine who's an editor said that the 2 writers he believes are going to be remembered from this time in America are Stephen King and Elmore Leonard, and for completely different reasons, because they're just they're coming at things from a different point of view. But yeah, no, I first read Bob Parker in college, at Boston College. I picked up the Godwolf manuscript at a Brentano's, long gone, on Boston Street. And I literally have read everything, and way more than one time. And in fact, Sunny happened because I had taken a trip up to Vermont to watch my daughter ride, and I was listening to Kate Burton. I forget which one it was. And when I got up there, I called and I said, how come nobody ever resumed Sunny? To my agent, Esther Newberg. And she said, let me find out. And she called me back in about an hour, and she said, I was talking to Ivan Held, who's my big boss, and he wants you to write a sample chapter. And I said, no. I'm not, I have enough to do. And she said, write the chapter. And I literally got up the next morning and wrote a chapter that became pretty much the first chapter of Blood Feud. And once I was in Sunny's head, and once I was, you know, into that world, just from her point of view, I just felt like I was where I was supposed to be.
When you talk about sound, it's interesting too. I think that it seems to me that, and you're a perfect example of this, is that something that sports writers are very good at, especially columnists, right? There's a sound to your shooting from the lip columns that used to run at Daily News on Sundays, right? I mean, I think and columnists like Pete Hamill, right? You can hear it even as you're reading it. And I think that's such an important quality to have.
Yeah, I think if people pick up something I wrote, they know I wrote it. Pete, God rest his soul, who was my mentor and one of my heroes and my friend, once wrote in an introduction of columns, a book of columns of mine, he said, a writer's voice is like a boxer's right hand. You either have one or you don't. And fortunately, that voice in my columns is not unlike the voice that I'm writing with Jesse and Sunny.
What is it about the mystery novel that attracts newspapermen? when you think about Pete Hamill wrote some.
Oh yeah.
Dave Atkins is a former newspaper man. Michael Connolly is a former newspaper man. There's you, John Sandford. All these writers who are in that genre come from the world of newspapers. What's so attractive about this genre?
Well, I just know Kevin, as a columnist, writing an 800 or 900 or 1,000 word newspaper column, you're basically telling a short story every day. You gotta rope people early. There's a beginning, there's a middle, there's an end. You got to know where to fit dialogue in. There's different dialogue every day. And I tell people all the time, the greatest training you can ever have as a writer is writing a column, because I kind of work in 1,000 word bursts. And if I write 1,000 words a day, which I usually do, that's 5,000 words, even if I don't write on weekend. And it's 100 words a month, 100 pages a month, and all of a sudden you're at a book. So when people say, "Oh my God, you write," you got the kids' books, you got the mysteries, you're writing all the time. I don't feel that way. Yeah. I'm just producing my normal output. But that structure of a newspaper column, sort of a linear, logical structure, lends itself perfectly to writing mysteries. There's a surprise at the end of Blood Feud that, if anybody's not read my first Sunny Randall, I'm not going to talk about, but there's a surprise at the end of that I literally didn't decide to do until I was 20 pages from the end of the book. I literally didn't decide until everybody was in the room for the big climax. And that's also the fun, because no matter how much you outline, and no matter how much you think like right now, I'm about 200 pages into the new Sunny Randall, okay? And I got all the pieces in the board, and sometimes I feel like I've got too many options for the way the story might end. And I literally don't know how it's gonna end, but at that point, you feel like one of your own readers, that you're turning the pages to find out what's gonna happen next.
Well, it's funny when people who don't, who say, how do you turn all this stuff out? And I'm not doing it on your level, God knows. But I've been doing morning newsbeat for almost 19 years now. And people say, how do you not get writer's block? And I always quote Robert B. Parker. I say, plumbers don't get plumber's block. Right? It's what I do. I get up in the morning and I write. I mean, that's, if people do that, that's, there is no excuse.
Let me tell you something. Joe Ide, who writes the IQ books that are just absolutely off the hook brilliant, okay? He once said to me, you know what writer's block is? Writer's block means you got up from the desk. And that's the way I as a newspaper columnist, I never had the luxury of writer's block, because I couldn't call my editor and say, I'm sorry, I'm just not feeling it today. And they say, no, we have this space that we're expecting you to fill.
Hey, when you came to the first Jesse Stone, and I don't want to give stuff away, but at all, did you feel at all that Reed Farrel Coleman had not written you into a corner, but kind of done that, in the sense that he had made some significant changes? One was him dealing with his alcoholism.
Yeah.
Going to AA.
Uh-huh.
And the other one was the introduction, and it's 2 books ago, so I don't mind bringing it up, the introduction of his son.
Uh-huh.
That he had. Was one of your goals to kind of write yourself not out of those corners, but to deal with them in your own way so you could get past them? I'm just curious.
No, I never felt like I'd been written into a corner. I felt like, you talked about the other people who had written these books, including Bob. I'm just trying to keep the line moving, okay? And the Cole, the son, has a small part in this book. He'll have a bigger part in the next one I write. And then, the only question at that point is, do you feel that your story is served better if Jesse falls off the wagon? And I made the determination, no, that that there had been such progress made with rehab. And, if I thought I was being written into a corner, I wouldn't have started this book in an AA meeting. And so I again, I came onto the field and I tried in my own way to start moving the ball down the field.
Yeah, I wondered with Cole, the son, if you felt he was sort of like Jesse Stone's Paul Giacomin from the Spencer novels, which he's maybe been in 6 books. So he's there when he's important, and he's just not used when he's not important.
Right. Yeah, no, I can see a role for him. I want to put him in the middle of something that I'm already imagining for the next one. He's a very interesting character, you know, and Jesse's alcoholism, whether he's been drinking or not drinking. You go back through the books, there have been times where he thought he's quit for good. And then it got so dark at the end of the last couple of books that he ended up in rehab. And my feeling is I'm just kind of honoring the whole rehab experience by keeping him sober in this book.
Yeah. Do you worry about, and if you do, how do you deal with it? Sort of adhering to the template without falling into formula, right? These are series books. We know who they are. How do you avoid that?
You know what? I imagined, even with all the history, and I forget, I think this is number 19, the 19th Jesse Stone book. I mean, my math might be off, okay? But you have to then approach it like it's a clean slate, that somebody's now thrown you the ball. And it's just such a tremendous opportunity. And there's some things I wanted to do. I wanted to expand Molly's role. I wanted to make Molly extremely proactive, because Molly's proven to be a great cop, you know, and I've always loved the relationship between Jesse and Suit, because Suit was like Jesse's son. And I allude in Fool's Paradise to the idea that it's a little complicated between Suit and Cole, because in a way they're kind of vying for Dad's affection. But, you know, the world has been created, but that doesn't mean then that you can't populate it with good guys and bad guys as the way you see fit.
Okay, so last question. So you and I are about the same age, and you've done newspapers, magazines, TV, radio, podcasts, books. I've done some of those, but not near on the same scale that you have. I always joke that I'll be coming to people's offices via hologram before I'm done. How do you think about remaining relevant, and how do you think about that?
I never think about it. I mean, I walked into the Daily News over 40 years ago, okay? And, you know, you can look at the back page of the Daily News on Sundays now, and my name is still there. And, you know, I'm still writing 1 column a week for them, sometimes more. I'm writing a couple of columns a week for MLB.com, because baseball has always been my first love. I don't know what relevant means. I'm getting to continue characters created by one of my writing heroes. I had no plans to write books for young readers, and Travel Team came out 16 years ago. And within 10 days, it was #1 on the New York Times. I just write, okay? People can sort out what it means and you know, what I've done in my career. But all I know is I got up this morning, I made some coffee. If I could pull over the yellow legal pad that has taken me up to where I am in the new Sunny book. And I just feel like I'm doing the only thing I ever really wanted to do, which is write. As Bill Goldman, another one of my heroes, once said, I just want to tell my stories, okay? And television was fun. We had a great time. Mitch Albom, Bob Ryan, and I were still doing the Sports Reporters as a podcast. We were on Sunday mornings on ESPN for 28 years. Nothing runs for 28 years, okay? And so I've gotten, you know, when I go to talk to kids at schools, I just tell them, I hope you all get to live out your dreams the way I've been able to live out mine. And I'm as enthusiastic about what I'm doing as I ever have been.
Well, listen, I am recommending to everybody's Fool's Paradise. I'm recommending the Sunny Randall books. I think they're terrific. You know, I interviewed you the first time back, I guess, 1986, when your first mystery novel came out, Dead Air. And it was so fun to see you get back into that world again.
Yeah. Yeah. I didn't think I ever would. And again, the whole Sunny thing just kind of fell into my lap. And once I got going, I'm thinking, oh man, you know, Bob Parker was my friend. And I think if you see the response to these books, it's been so tremendous. I think he'd be pretty happy.
That's terrific. Well, listen, thanks again for joining us on Morning Newsbeat. And I look forward to the next Sunny Randall.
Thanks for having me, Kevin.
Take care.